As one of the original Uncanny X-Men back in 1963, Cyclops had a ton of potential. He's always been a key member of the Mutant Squad, and his eyes can basically punch things, so you'd think that would warrant a little more respect around the Marvel Universe. But comic book writers have done a pretty great job of making Scott Summers Marvel's most hated hero. Let's take a look at the many ways this mutant leader went from being kind of cool to kind of a creep. A lousy lover. Cyclops has a pretty awful history when it comes to how he treats women, whether it's his girlfriend, cloned wife, or just some random swamp floozy he's trying to move on with. When he believes his longtime girlfriend, Jean Grey, is dead from a volcanic explosion in Uncanny X-Men number 113, what does Scott do? He gets over his grief pretty quick, and starts dating Marvel mainstay Colleen Wing. Then, Cyclops straight up dumps Wing once he finds out that Jean is still alive, and proposes in Uncanny X-Men number 136. But Jean dies again as the Dark Phoenix an issue later. By issue number 144, he's back at it with some lady in Florida named Lee Forrester. We'll chalk all that up to bad dating habits, but it gets worse. Cyclops marries his dead fiancé's clone, Madeline Pryor, in Uncanny X-Men number 175. And then he doesn't even treat his clone wife well. It's eventually revealed that Pryor was a tool in Mr. Sinister's nefarious plans. But well before that revelation, Cyclops had already started hanging out with Jean Grey, back from the dead for the 100th time after hatching from a weird ocean cocoon. Leaving his wife at home with Cyclops Jr., aka Nathan Summers, aka Cable. Madeline does get her sort of revenge, hooking up with Cyclops' brother, becoming the Goblin Queen and raising some hell. But when Madeline dies later, Jean Grey actually mourns harder than Scott does for his own former wife and baby mama. And we can't even get into which of these Jean Greys were actually Jean Grey, and which were actually the Phoenix in Jean Grey form. It gets complicated. Anyway, even after ditching his family for a back-from-the-dead for real Jean Grey, he decides his new relationship is getting a little tired, since constant death and resurrection isn't spicy enough. Ever the loyal lover, Scott tries to liven things up with some telepathic therapy from Emma Frost, who's dressed up as Phoenix. Since he's married to another immensely powerful psychic, Jean quickly discovers his telepathic tryst. So what does Cyclops do? He tries to weasel his way out of it, claiming their liaisons didn't count because they weren't physical. And did we mention this? Somehow he also found time to hook up with Storm. And who the heck is this? Maybe his eyes aren't the only part of his body that he can't control. Maybe he should invest in some ruby quartz underwear. And that is why you fail as husband material, Mr. Summers. Work over family. Being the unpaid leader of Charles Xavier's mutant squad is not an easy job, especially when humans mostly just hate you constantly. Sometimes an X-Man just wants to get married, settle down, and spawn an Omega-level mutant or two. Not Scott Summers though. Despite getting married to the aforementioned Madeline Pryor, Cyclops never left his supervillain battling life behind, continually putting the needs of the team before the needs of his growing family. If Cyclops was the sole mutant out there capable of paying it forward, that'd be one thing. But the X-Men and the Xavier Institute are both overflowing with butt-kicking mutants, like Dummy, and Beak, and Glob Herman. Anyway, even Storm confronted Scott at one point over his dereliction of family duties. His response? Well, he challenged her to a duel, of course, and he lost, even though Storm didn't use her powers. He built a murder squad. The mutant team known as X-Force was always a bit rough around the edges, and often found themselves at odds with both the X-Men and the government, as well as the anti-mutant groups they battled. None of these problems were helped by Cyclops being an extremely divisive leader. In Uncanny X-Men number 493, Scott Summers shows some early signs of being a total fascist by reorganizing the team to kill his own son Cable. As if tracking and murdering your own kid wasn't bad enough, he took the traumatized teenage killing machine X-23 on board. He encouraged her murdery tendencies, rather than helping her reform, which went against Wolverine's wishes, and that of course earned him a good old Logan punch to the face.
Prove it. You're a
And naturally, Cyclops disavows any knowledge of X-Force's actions, until he's caught red-handed by the rest of the X-Men, and it's far from the last time Cyclops would be a dangerous extremist. He brought Phoenix back. Over the years, the X-Men have dealt with more than their fair share of ridiculously powerful beings, but few of their foes matched the devastating Phoenix Force. Cyclops didn't just deal with this cosmic firestorm on numerous occasions, he basically married the woman who was possessed by it. But despite enjoying far too much FaceTime with a creature that once destroyed an entire populated world out of spite, Scott Summers decided to welcome it back to Earth during the Avengers vs. X-Men event. The Phoenix Force breaks apart and chooses to join with him and 4 fellow mutants. But it turns out that just one part of the Phoenix Force isn't enough. So he steals some from his on-again, off-again girlfriend Emma Frost, making himself nearly omnipotent. Insane with power, Cyclops goes full Dark Phoenix and tries to kill pretty much everyone. In the penultimate issue, the altruistic Professor X tried to help Cyclops escape his cosmic power trip, but Scott declined, forcing Xavier to lay the psychic smackdown on him. Unfortunately, even an Omega-level mutant like Professor X is no match for the intergalactic might of the Phoenix, and he's absolutely totally murdered by Cyclops. All of this even before he's taken over by the Phoenix Force, so he can't even really blame the alien entity for being a jerkbag. In the end, he's stripped of his powers, and Scott winds up in prison, moaning about his public image, because it's all about him, right? From hero to radical, merging himself with the corrupting Phoenix Force, and having it literally punched out of him would probably be enough to make most superheroes go cold turkey for a while. But Cyclops never seems to learn his lesson. Many readers agree that the downward spiral began with 2000's X-Men number 97, when he merged with Apocalypse. But things only got worse after the Phoenix thing. In Avengers vs. X-Men Consequences, Magneto and his crew bust Cyclops out of super jail. The X-Man then goes on to declare a mutant revolution, threatening anyone and everyone with the wrong end of an optic blast. In the months following his death in Death of X, Summers even inspires a crew of brutal mutant thugs to carry on his genocidal uprising, a not-so-merry band that calls themselves the Ghosts of Cyclops. You guys, Cyclops isn't just a jerk, he's kind of a full-fledged war criminal, and that includes an earlier incident from Secret Invasion, where he intentionally infects an invading force of Skrulls with the Legacy virus, which is incredibly bad news, and had the potential to spread just about everywhere very quickly. Aren't there, like, laws about this kind of thing? He incited war from beyond the grave. When Cyclops discovers that a weird fog has killed the mutants of Muir Island during the Death of X storyline, including Multiple Man Jamie Madrox, fingers are immediately pointed at the Inhumans and their transformative Terrigen mists. In an effort to destroy the mutant blighting mists, Cyclops recruits a small army, including a chemical whiz kid named Alchemy, who pretty much wants nothing to do with the mutant war, and ends up getting killed while neutralizing just one of a few of the toxic fart clouds. At the end of the battle, Cyclops is killed by Black Bolt's ridiculous singing voice, becoming a martyr for everything wrong with the pro-mutant cause. Except Cyclops wasn't even alive at the time. He was killed by the mutant plague before the first issue even ended, and from then on, he was only a deranged psychic projection created by Emma Frost. Sadly, dead men have no PR departments, so it's easy to understand why so many people ended up hating Cyclops. But his worst crime of all? He's named Cyclops, and he has 2 eyes. What a freaking liar. Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.